Jamie Austin here. Welcome back to Real Estate of Mind. As you know, we always love to talk about interesting real estate topics that can perhaps help you, get off the fence, buy something, sell something, whatever the case may be. But we're always trying to bring you interesting content. And today we are definitely doing that. The guest today is David Coe of Coe Real Estate Group, and he is going to be talking about a new law that just was passed in 2024, AB 1033, which if you don't know what that means, that's okay. That's what this show's about. We're going to explain it to you and tell you what you can do and how you can take advantage of it. So, David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamie. Great to be here.
You bet. So it's crazy. Like, obviously in Los Angeles, we have a shortage of inventory, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just feel like for several years after COVID, with the shortage of inventory, building supplies, whatever the case may be, everybody's been scrambling on how to get creative for housing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So tell us about the new law that just passed in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's no surprise there's a housing shortage in all of California, not just LA County.
Absolutely.
And, over the last, I'll say 10 years, there's been all these new initiatives to go through and try to improve housing.
Right.
The challenge with housing is, do you go tall and dense or do you kind of spread out wide? Well, we don't have much more space to spread
go
out.
Wide, we don't.
And especially in LA, we have a lot of single family or R1 zone properties that only allow for one residence.
That's right.
So a couple of years ago, they legalized the building of an ADU, which is an accessory dwelling unit. And it took a while for that law to kind of settle in and allow for construction of ADUs. A lot of cities challenged that. So this year, the new bill, AB 1033, which was just passed back in October and went into effect January the 1st, will now allow homeowners to take that ADU and subdivide it from their main property and then sell that off as an additional home. Versus right now with the ADU law, you can build an ADU. If you wanted to sell it, you'd have to sell the entire parcel, which would include the primary home and the accessory dwelling unit.
That is a game changer, huge. Like if you have a 7,500 square foot lot and you have say a 2,000 square foot home, and then you built out an ADU, which is only taking maybe say 1,500 square feet of that lot, you still have land left over, but what do you do? Like if you wanted to sell the ADU, that wasn't even on the table a year ago.
No.
And so it's fascinating to me because I think it kind of brings up a couple of things. Like it will allow first-time buyers maybe to get into a market that they probably couldn't get in otherwise?
I think that's the biggest part of this, is that you're creating affordable housing, but not because you're building affordable housing. You're just building smaller housing on smaller lots. Right. So much in California, our price is the land. So if you reduce the amount of land, and ADUs are meant to be accessory dwelling units, they're smaller than the primary residence. So if you're now creating a new housing unit in a neighborhood, but it's a half of the size of the home and half or a third of the size of the land, then technically the price should be half, of the price. So it's going to create, I think, a lot of opportunities for first-time home buyers to get in and start building some equity. And, the advantages to the existing homeowners that own the lot are huge. And quite frankly, one of the things about this law that's different than previous laws that were passed is that it actually allows investors or developers to take advantage of this, whereas some other measures that California has passed have passed in the past did not allow investors to take advantage of these new rules.
So explain that. How does an investor take advantage of it?
So, if I am a single family home investor and I want to, let's say, do a fix and flip on a property, or maybe I want to buy a piece of rental property, maybe I've inherited a piece of property that I want to convert to a rental. Now what I can do is create this new ADU and separate that and either sell each of the parcels individually, or if I'm a buy and hold investor, I can now keep both of the properties, but now because it's been subdivided, it's got a new APN. I can put additional debt on that rear unit as well as I can on the front unit. So it gives me more options as a homeowner, as an investor, to where, I can create another parcel, but don't have to go out and buy another piece of property.
And another source of income as well that's on the books that you can use as a tax write-off, I'm assuming, as well.
Exactly right. So let's say I already own the piece of property. Maybe I have a nice little 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, 1,600 square feet, and it's renting for $3,000 a month, right? I can now either convert a garage, a detached garage, or maybe I want to do ground up new construction. I can now create another rental unit that might be a 1-bedroom, maybe even a 2-bedroom unit, but I didn't have to go out and buy more land. I didn't have to acquire more property. All I have to do is go through the construction process of getting that permitted, building it, and doing some paperwork on the subdivision part of it. And the return on that for an investor has a much higher rate of return, because usually the most expensive part of any development is the land acquisition part.
Absolutely. And so when you're doing that, are you assuming, so when you say you go through the process of getting the paperwork, like in addition to getting the building permits for, like, say, if you're doing a ground up ADU, are you having to go through the city to do a rezoning, or does it stay, or how does the zoning come into play?
That's a good question. So, I mean, really, they're not changing the zoning. What the new law allows for cities that opt in, which is an important part of that, we can talk more about that. For cities that opt in, they don't have to change the zoning. This will now be allowed as part of that city's code.
Wow.
So now they can just go through and apply for the building permit and construct. And they have to go through the subdivision process, where basically what you're creating is a new tract map for that new piece of property, which you've been able to convert and subdivide property forever. That's a big part of my construction that we do, is we'll take existing homes called infill construction, and we'll subdivide that into smaller lots and build more medium density properties on that. So the ability to subdivide has always been in every city's development laws.
Right.
What this new law does is it now allows the ability on a single family home to create that second unit and then subdivide it and go through that tract map process. And then from there, as a homeowner or an investor, you've got multiple options on how you can utilize that new APN.
That's amazing. So it does create a new APN, and at the same time, it's legit, but they don't have to go through the process of getting a variance to change the zoning.
Correct.
Okay, that's awesome.
Correct.
And the one thing that I just kind of think of, and correct me if I'm wrong, I do want to talk about the cities that opt in, so don't let me forget about that.
Okay.
But the other thing I think of is, okay, so let's say somebody sells their ADU. They have one garage that gets back there. So does that mean that the owner of the house and the ADU, which technically at one point was on one piece of property, 1 square footage of lot of land, do they now have to create an HOA, an easement? Like, what happens with how you get access to the property? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, every property will be different, right?
Absolutely.
Let's take, for example, if it was a corner lot, right? Well, now all of a sudden you may not need to create an easement.
That's right.
Because you have access to that new piece of that new parcel,
or you have an alley,
right? So I think corner properties with alleys, those are going to be the kinds of properties that investors are going to target.
Of course.
Because now they can really create 2 separate parcels. But if you're a homeowner and you have let's say you want to convert a garage detached in your backyard, you already have a driveway to get back there.
Right.
So as you go through the tract map process and you go through creating, you have to adjust the current APN because now you're losing some of your land.
Right.
So you would create an easement to allow that rear property owner to get access to their lot.
And if you don't understand, like, this is sort of like we get in sort of with builders and realtors, we sort of know some of these terms, but if you don't know what an easement is an agreement between homeowners that if there is a particular section of the property that is not clear direct access to a property in itself, you have to create an easement so that you allow other people to use that road to get to the other property. Sometimes there's a utility easement.
Actually, almost always there's a utility. Almost every property in California already has an easement for utilities.
Absolutely, because sometimes utility companies, they can't always, like, if they didn't have an easement, then it would be considered trespassing against private property. So you have to create an easement. And I'm just wondering, do you think that this, in essence, the other thing I think about is, like, drawing more traffic, or do you because obviously now you've got a single family home that's now cut into two, and you had an owner that might have 2 cars and now you might have 4 cars. Do you think that there's going to be a difference I think about some sellers who might go, this is awesome, if I'm investing and want to get some more opportunity to create income. But then I also think about the look and the feel of the neighborhood. How is that going to affect? And are there any regulations that they're kind of putting in place to kind of keep neighborhoods looking sort of the same, so that you don't have something start crazy happening where you got, a single level house and now suddenly you got a 2-story ADU, and can that person, once they own the ADU, totally change the look of it, go up, go out, whatever on that tiny piece of land?
Well, let's talk about that part first, and it gets back to your question before about opting in.
Yeah.
So, and also about zoning, right?
Yeah.
So what this does now is that we are not going through and rezoning a single family neighborhood. Okay. So it's not like we're creating an R2 and R3 where you can create all this really additional thick density.
Yeah.
You're only allowing, actually all this new law allows is something that you can already do, because ADUs are now legal in California.
That's right.
So that problem already exists.
Right.
This AB 1033 doesn't resolve any of that.
Okay.
What it does allow, to go back to what was different between when the ADU law was passed.
Yeah.
So when that ADU law was passed, I believe it was in 2020.
Yep.
The state mandated that every city has to allow for these ADUs. Now, you still have to pass building codes,
Absolutely.
setbacks. Not every property in California you can fit an ADU in there.
That's right.
I live in Redondo Beach, and in my backyard, I have my neighbor's house. We're already a 2 and a lot, right? We've got no space for an ADU.
Right.
But if I have the room on that, by law, California law, you were allowed to build an ADU.
Okay.
And a lot of cities fought that, right? So there were a lot of legal challenges to that. The process on how you get an ADU, permitting an ADU, it took 2 to 3 years for this law for ADUs to kind of settle in.
Mm-hmm.
And now, pretty much every community, this is now possible.
Yeah.
And, from a traffic standpoint, it's not like all of a sudden we're building ADUs and we're going to have all these new people coming to California to buy them.
Yeah.
These people already live here. They already have a car, right? So we might be redistributing traffic away from higher dense areas and spreading out within our R1 communities. But this new law doesn't create more density. That already exists.
Yeah.
What this law allows whoever created that ADU to do is now to separate it and sell it or hold it.
Yeah.
And create another piece of property.
Yeah.
And the great example that I give to people, what's your favorite market that you love to work in?
Oh my God, Newport Beach, Manhattan Beach.
All right. Well, let's say something a little more inland where there's land.
Let's say, let me see, whose land is kind of tricky.
We're in California.
Let's say Irvine. I
was going to suggest Irvine. All right. Okay. Let's say there's a house in Irvine, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in Irvine on a 6,000 square foot lot.
Yep.
How much is that house right now, considering it's in marginal condition?
Marginal condition, I'd probably say the house is probably worth about 1.2, 1.3.
Let's say $1 million just for the purpose of this conversation.
I like round numbers.
Yeah, round numbers is good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the house already has a big backyard. I go through and create an ADU, and I create a 600 square foot ADU. It's a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. Let's say I've dedicated 2,000 feet of that 6,000 square foot lot, and I build my ADU. From a construction cost standpoint, that's probably about $250,000, but I spent $0 on acquiring any land, right? Because I already own the land.
Right.
Okay. Now I've created an easement. I've got a small HOA, which we can talk about in a minute as well. And now I go through and sell that property in Irvine. How much would a 600 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bath house sell in Irvine?
Wow. I'd probably say minimum maybe 500,000 to 600,000.
Let's say 500 again, for round numbers.
Yeah.
which means I just spent $250,000, maybe another $30,000 or $40,000 in soft cost, and now I've created a new parcel in my backyard that's worth $500,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, last question for you. That original house, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, is now on a 4,000 square foot lot. How much is that house worth in Irvine?
It's probably gonna be now like maybe 900 or something. You're probably not gonna lose that much.
I'm not gonna lose that much.
You're not gonna lose that much.
Right. So I just took my $1 million parcel, I devalued it by $100,000, but I created a $500,000 parcel in my backyard.
Yeah.
So now the value of that exact same piece of land, just by spending $250,000 plus some soft costs in construction, now just went up to $1.5 million.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So by doing the subdivision and creating the separate APN, even if I don't decide to sell it, maybe for homeowners, I'm a multi-generational situation, or I've got a teenager that I want them to have their own space or something along those lines.
Or start building like their own credit, and they could inherit it and start
absolutely
their real estate portfolio.
Maybe you're older, you've got multiple kids, and you want to create 2 parcels, right? So they can each get a parcel.
Yeah.
Right. There's so many applications of how this law is going to work to help benefit California homeowners, even if they never actually sell off the parcels. But I do think there will be quite a bit of people. I mean, as a developer, we're actively looking for parcels in cities that we think are going to adopt the regulation, which is another thing we can talk about. And right now, maybe you're buying a single family home, you're going to renovate it, you're going to rent it out, and then maybe you're going to convert the ADU, rent that out as well. Well, somewhere down the line, if that city actually adopts the rules for AB 1033 and creates their own local ordinances on what's to do with that, the only thing I have to do later in the game to create a huge amount of value is just go through the subdivision process and create the new APN.
Okay.
There's no more construction that's needed. I've already converted the space into an ADU.
You already have the land. It's all good.
And now I've just created a huge amount of equity value on that same parcel that I own by doing the subdivision.
So before you have, before a city adopts the AB 1033, so are you going ahead and, like, let's say you're actively looking for properties, or even people that are, whatever, individual buyers now looking for a way to future build their real estate portfolio without having to buy separate parcels of land. If you could take one parcel, divide it, are you going ahead and getting the permits to go ahead and convert an ADU or build an ADU? So either way, like when you add an ADU on a piece of property, even if it doesn't get adopted, whatever, you're adding value to the land. You're adding value to the property. So no matter what, you're going to be increasing your equity, because then it's a potential rental income situation, even if this didn't exist, even if this law didn't exist. So you're going ahead and developing these ADUs, and then you're like, okay, but we're focusing on areas where we think they might adopt the program. So then all we have to do is then do the subdividing process and then get a new APN, and then you're good.
Right. I mean, like you mentioned before, Laguna Beach and Newport Beach, those are great markets, right?
Right.
There's not a lot of big properties in there. And the ones that are big properties are usually very expensive homes.
Absolutely.
And those people probably aren't going to subdivide and put an ADU in their backyard.
Probably not.
Right. But the city of Los Angeles, the city of Long Beach,
oh,
right?
Yeah.
You know, and most of my market is in the South Bay or up here in the Valley, right? North Hollywood, you know, Torrance, Hawthorne.
Even in Orange County, Santa Ana, Garden Grove, like
City of Orange.
City of Orange, absolutely. Tustin. All those places.
Those cities are more likely to adopt AB 1033 because they already have a property or stock, right, that's going to fit what this law is intended to do. And every city in California has been challenged by the state of California to develop a plan on how they're going to increase their amount of housing. I think it's by 20%.
Wow.
Right. So this now becomes a critical part of your plan as a community to create additional housing. And guess what? The housing you're creating is actually affordable, right? Because they're smaller units, right? That might make sense for first-time home buyers or single home buyers that, you know, want to live in something that's nice, but they can't afford $1 million home.
Right.
But they could afford a $500,000 home.
Right. So where would you say, so let's get back to the cities that might opt into this. So what are your thoughts on that? So they've given the state of California the challenge to come up with affordable housing 20. And granted, you are absolutely right. Like, like I work in the Newport Beach, Manhattan Beach, and you're right. Those cities are like, do not touch my lot. I want to put a McMansion here and take up all the square footage I possibly can. I don't have room for that, and I don't want the look of that.
I think that's why those cities aren't going to adopt this, right? Yeah. Now, they were forced to adopt the ADU, and they fought it, right? Versus this new law is a state law that says, look, if you're a city that decides to adopt it, here are the minimum standards that your city ordinance has to meet. Okay. But now you're not going to have all the lawsuits like we had when they made ADUs legal, because it's not being forced on the cities. The cities can opt in. So again, bigger cities like Long Beach and Los Angeles, probably up and down the state, San Francisco, San Jose, and then, cities that are probably more, I'll say, median income, median property values, where you do have a lot of homes built in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s.
Absolutely. Post-war homes.
Post-World War II homes.
Absolutely.
3-2s with detached garages or 3-2s with big backyards in the back. Those are the kinds of cities that are going to adopt this, because more than likely their residences, their homeowners will be asking for it. Yep. Their constituencies will be voting for it. Yep. And it's just going to allow them to create more value in their existing property, and it's going to help the individual city meet their additional housing guidelines that they're doing through the state of California.
Absolutely. And what do you think,
without having to go through and rezone?
Exactly. And that's what I was saying. So like sometimes there used to be a site, I think it's still on. Is Zima still?
Zima is still for the city of LA.
For the city of LA. So Zima is a website you could go on and then you could plug in the address and find out what it was zoned for, if it's near whatever commercial, and then they'll give you a number. So you're right about that. And then if you wanted to change what the zoning was, you would have to apply, go through the city. It's a process to get a variance to see.
And the community.
The
city's the easy part. Right. It's the neighbors that you have to go through on a rezoning who will, it just takes one neighbor
that says no. I don't think I want that. Yeah.
And they'll marshal support. Maybe they have revenue. Then they have the ability to stall you out. So usually getting a zoning change through the city, that's the easy part, is having to convince your neighbors of the zoning change. And that's where a lot of these types of things fall apart.
Yeah. That makes sense. And so now that it's a statewide law that you can opt in and they're not forcing it on you, maybe a little bit less lawsuits, but it will be interesting to see what cities opt in. Is there a time limit as to when they can opt in or not? Are they?
No. This is now from here. I mean, the way I interpret the rule is that from here on, any city that decides to adopt AB 1033 can and allow subdivisions of ADUs on single-family homes. And not just single-family homes, you can also build ADU on multifamily homes. Okay. So if I've got an 8-plex, right, the California law reads that for every 4 units, you can build one ADU. So if now I'm a apartment building owner, I can build two. And maybe I've got some tuck under parking, or maybe I've got an area where there's just a canopy over parking. I might take parking away from a couple of my tenants, or I would charge for parking and I would take some of those spots away, build 2 new ADUs, and now I can subdivide that and then either sell those separately or put debt against them, just like a single family homeowner can as well.
Wow.
So this isn't just limited to single family homes. This kind of ties on to ADUs, where you can build an ADU. If the city adopts it, now you can subdivide it and
let me reiterate that point. So 1 to 4 units, anything from 1 to 4, you can build one ADU. And then you would have, so if you had a 6-plex instead of an 8-plex, could you build 2, or do you need one
ADU?
So you have to get up to 8. And then another subsequent 4 to build 3 or whatever. So it's like every increment of 4, you're allowed 1.
And you have to have space, right?
Yes.
You still have to meet all the guidelines on the building code for that city, on setback, on FAR, on...
What is FAR for?
FAR is floor area ratio.
Okay.
There's also height restrictions. Like you just because you can build an ADU doesn't mean you can violate what the building codes are for your zone. So if I'm built in an R1, if my home is in an R1 and I'm in Hawthorne, there are certain guidelines for how big of a home I can build based on the size of my lot.
It used to be the size of your primary residence. So let's just say for round numbers, 1,500. Your ADU could not be more than double that or like half of that. So like the largest ADU you could build would be 750 square feet, correct?
Yep.
Or less.
Or less.
Or it could be 500.
And again, this law doesn't change the requirements for what the ADU law does.
That's right.
You still can build the exact same ADU you could build from the law that was passed 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
All this new law does is allow you to do is to now segregate it and subdivide it.
There we go.
And gives you all these additional options once you've gone through the subdivision.
Which is why when you go to the city and you get the permits to build, you'll know what within that city and community would have ordinance-wise for building or whatever their restrictions are for building an ADU.
And a lot of cities like LA, County of LA, they actually did build new restriction or new regulations on what you could do with the ADU.
Interesting.
Right? And some cities even allow you to build more than one for every 4 units.
Wow.
Right? So there are certain cities that have actually increased what you can do as a homeowner.
So maybe more than one ADU and for under 4, like 1 to 4.
Correct.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
So
what city is that? Where they have the land for that?
I think it's in Orange County. I want to say it might have been Irvine. It could have been Brea. I forget what city it is, but there are cities that allow for more than what the state allows. The state law for ADU says at a minimum you have to offer this.
Right.
But as a city, if you want to offer more, it's up to you.
You can opt in and offer more and make your own ordinances as to what they're going to require.
Correct. So whatever city you're in, you can. This law didn't change anything on what I could do to build an ADU.
Right.
The only change is how I can now subdivide it.
Where would somebody go, like a layman, go on a website to find out, hey, if I'm going to start to kind of dabble in this, is there a website that people could go to check to see like what the ordinances are or what their building codes are? Do you have a resource for that?
Yeah, the city website.
The city website.
So every city in California has their building code posted online.
Okay.
So if I'm in Redondo Beach and I want to look up Redondo Beach building code, I can go on the City of Redondo Beach's website, building and safety, their code is there. There's usually a map on the city's website where you can figure out what your zoning is in case you don't know. Okay. And then on there, it would say exactly what my FAR is, what my setbacks are, which are all probably things that a layman may not be able to understand. But if you are going to do something like build an ADU, you're probably going to hire an architect or a contractor or someone that's a professional that can actually help you interpret the code. You're going to have to get plans put together. You're going to have to submit the plans. The hardest part of all of this will be building the ADU. The easiest part of this will be the subdivision.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So the subdivision and then whatever HOA, which we do need to talk about,
let's talk about
whatever HOA that you decide to create, that's just legal paperwork.
Yeah.
Right? There's no construction.
The hard part would be if
that.
you had to get another piece of land, which we are running out of land.
We're not making any more.
No, there's no more land. We haven't got any more land, so we got to work with what we got. And so speaking of that, let's talk about an HOA. So would that be, again, like a city ordinance, like you have to have an HOA, or would there be some people say you don't need an HOA? Tell me about that.
So I live in Redondo Beach in a 2-on lot. Okay, so we're technically a condo, right? Or a townhouse, even though we're detached.
Right.
Okay, so my neighbor and I, the day I bought my house, we have to have, by law, when the builder built my property, they put together an HOA.
Yep.
Okay, so when I moved in, my neighbor was like, hey, look, I don't care about this HOA. What if we just agree to split everything 50-50? I'll have my insurance policy. You have yours, which we could do because we were detached, not attached.
Absolutely.
And we just decided to disband our HOA. Okay.
Interesting.
Now, so as homeowners, we have the ability to do that. more than likely, if I am creating an HOA, so first of all, if I own the property, I'm going to create the HOA, right? So I'm going to dictate the terms of the HOA however I want them to be dictated. Now, obviously, I don't want to make them unfair, or whoever it might be, if I do decide to sell my ADU, might be like, hey, how come I have to pay for everything?
Right. How
I'm
come
not
I'm
going to do
paying
this.
50-50 and I only have like 500 square feet and you have 4,000 square feet here?
But what's different is that it's not like I'm creating an HOA for a 200-unit apartment building.
Exactly.
And I have to have a management company, and I have to have a board, and I have to have all these rules and regulations.
You would probably just hire an attorney for that and just get the paperwork like squared away.
These are going to be very simple HOAs at most.
At most.
Right?
Like one or two page. I've sold a unit where it was like 1-page HOA.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, I mean, I'm sure most people know the term, but HOA is Homeowners Association. So yeah. Okay.
So there will be a necessity to have an HOA. If you have an easement, you're probably going to, I mean, that gets recorded, and there'll probably be some rules on who maintains that easement, right? Where both of the homeowners need to have some kind of agreement. But that'll be part of, like, I might hire an architect to put together plans for my ADU for construction.
Right.
Then I'm going to hire an attorney who's going to come through and help me with my paperwork to do the subdivision map and help me put together the HOA and the CC&Rs.
Yeah.
Right. So there'll be another professional that you'll bring in, but the cost of doing that
is way less
than the architect. The fees may be the same for both, but when I'm done with the architect, I now have to go hire a contractor and go into construction, right? When I finish my plans for the HOA and the CC&Rs and the subdivision, I'm done.
That's it. Yeah. And interesting. So you disbanded your HOA. Now, question, just I'm going down probably not too much of a rabbit hole, but like let's say you decided to sell your, and it's really unusual because Redondo Beach is one of those cities that it's hard to describe, but they do have a lot of properties that they're kind of long and skinny. But a lot of people have put, they are technically condos, but they can be standalone homes with yards and everything. And there's a space in between and then another home. They call them two on a lot. So on one piece of property, you have two separate homes. And I've sold a 3 on a lot where all 3 were attached, but only by one wall. But they were considered condos, but they were huge. I mean, they were massive. Some of these lots go on.
Right.
So if you were
in that situation, they usually will keep the HOA because they need one insurance policy because it's one structure.
Exactly. And you can't you can't take care of 1/3 of the roof.
Right.
Like,
exactly
it's a roof that's all continuous or a paint job that's all continuous. You don't want to have some guy going, I'll just divide a line here and paint mine bright orange and you guys can stay beige.
Right.
So there's usually things like that in place to kind of keep the look uniform. But if you were disbanding your HOA and now you've decided to sell your home and move to a different place, would you then have to reinstate an HOA or how would that work?
Nope. I could sell my property and I can disclose to my new potential buyer that we no longer have an active HOA.
Okay.
We're not paying any dues. We have an agreement in place that says we're just going to split the repair on everything 50-50. Right?
Okay.
I take care of my backyard. He takes care of his backyard. Whenever there's really the big thing for us is the fence. We've had to replace and repair our fence a few times over the years.
Wow, and you just
we split the cost of that.
50-50.
When we painted our homes, we just happened to do it at the same time, but he didn't have to paint his house when I painted mine.
Yeah.
Now I have a neighbor where we're friends and this works great. So I would disclose that. And maybe the new buyer would say, I don't want that. I would rather have an HOA. Well, then they may not buy my home.
Right.
Or maybe they'll buy it and then they'll try to convince my neighbor that, hey, look, I would like to activate the HOA again. Right. And if my neighbor says no, then they're stuck.
Usually, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually the HOA also brings into like an insurance issue with like making sure that the property's insured and that you've got all of that stuff lined up. But again, if you've got a reasonable neighbor, which sometimes that's the
wild card.
That's the wild card.
That's true.
Yeah, not everybody can control their neighbors,
right?
And or what they consider maintenance.
Yeah, and even in our property, our HOA doesn't require that we have insurance because we have no HOA.
Okay.
But our insurance companies require that the other parcel be insured.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So that's one of the risks that I took. Each year we have to share each other's insurance policies to make sure that the other unit is insured.
That makes sense.
And if for some reason he stopped insuring his home, I might not be able to get insurance on my home
if
that one wasn't insured. So that is a risk that I took. But again, he's my neighbor, he's my friend, who's not going to insure their home.
Right.
It's kind of a mandatory part of owning a home is making sure it's insured.
110%. But it also kind of begs to the fact that just recently we've also had 13 insurance carriers leave the state of California.
Getting insurance is a lot more challenging than it used to be.
It's a lot more challenging and a lot more expensive. So I always say if you have a home insurance policy, whatever you do, keep it or make sure the policy hasn't changed and they don't just automatically up the price without letting you know. That has definitely been a game changer. One thing that, so let's say you've gone through the process, now you've subdivided, you now have an ADU and all that good stuff. I'm now a potential first-time home buyer. And you are putting your ADU portion of your parcel up for sale. You are going to stay in the main house, but you are going to let a first-time home buyer or a buyer buy the ADU. What does the financing look like for that? Is it the same? Is it traditional, conventional financing, or now is there going to have to be a special loan program for these ADUs? What do you can speak to that?
Yeah, so that's the big wild card in this. In California, most of the lenders aren't familiar with how you would finance that, right?
Exactly.
So I've actually spoken to a few lenders that are like, look, if I already have an existing home and my collateral is a 7,500 square foot lot on your home, and then you now want to take 2,000 square feet
off,
you're actually changing my collateral, I could call the loan.
Absolutely.
So that's a big portion of this that lenders are going to have to adopt, but it's not brand new in the United States of America. There are other states like Oregon that have already adopted rules like this.
Okay.
So a lot of national lenders already have a process and a regulation on how to handle that situation. I think the people that are going to take immediate advantage of this is if I own the property outright and have no debt, which there are a significant number of people who own their properties outright. Yeah. I don't have a lender, right?
Yeah.
So there is no loan.
It's a non-issue.
Or if I'm an investor, more than likely I'm buying that property with private money anyway, and that's all cash,
yep.
Right? Or all cash,
right?
Which means that I go into it with my explanation to my lender that, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to build a new ADU, and then I'm going to sell them off separately, or I'm going to subdivide them and keep both of them and then take you out with long-term debt.
Yeah.
So that's the lending part of this for traditional homeowners that have a property. That's going to be some time where the lenders have to figure out how they're going to do that. Are the properties going to be deemed condos after a single family home?
Interesting.
Every city may have certain regulations on how they implement that part of it. So there's still work to be done on this. This has only been a law now for 2 months.
Yep.
And AB 1033 was the bill that was passed in October.
Yeah.
Kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right. So there hasn't been a lot of thinking on the implementation of this.
Right.
That's what's probably going to happen this year.
Yeah.
I would say 2025 is probably where this is you're going to start to see the actual, execution of this in certain communities. 2024 is probably going to be a year that,
they're kind of figuring things out.
They're figuring things out.
And getting ordinances and what they want per city.
Right.
And I heard you say, that's interesting. I heard you say, because an ADU, technically, I heard that it was more of a condo situation, just meaning that it's not quite a single family home, which is considered larger or whatever by perception. Is that where you think they're headed, is to call them condos? So it would be, technically, you would be trying to get a loan on a condo,
right,
which sometimes has different financing regulations. Like they need different qualifications for that. And then would it be FHA approved, which is a national program? And then would it get involved with that? So you're right. I think that it's just at the very beginning. But I wanted to have you on the show because this is potentially a game changer for a lot of first-time home buyers, and definitely a game changer for all of those people that own properties outright.
Well, I mean, I would say what's one of the biggest things happening in society right now that is affecting our supply is that older people want to age in place.
Yes.
Right? Like those people that were in their 60s that used to sell their house and move into a condo, they no longer want to do that. They want to age in place. but maybe they're on, a restricted income now, right?
Right.
Well, this allows those kinds of people who have a pretty high probability of maybe having their house paid off already, where they don't have to leave their neighborhood. They don't have to leave the community where all their friends are. They don't have to leave the community where all their doctors are, where their favorite restaurants are.
Yeah.
They can now build an ADU in the back when they're done, sell it, recoup a huge amount of capital, right, that they can also use to live on and never have to leave their home, right? So, and then really not even be that inconvenienced by construction, because all the construction's happening in their backyard.
That's right. Or the flip side too is that a lot of things I'm seeing with the people like that too, they're also empty nesters. Or they're getting down and they're downsizing.
Right.
So maybe what they'll do is they'll build the ADU and move into the ADU, keep the property,
absolutely,
keep both of them, move into the ADU, and then rent out the front house and get income that way. So there's
rent out the ADU,
or
right?
Rent out the ADU.
Let's say I am a older person in a home and I have bathtubs that I can no longer step in. Right. I've got a kitchen countertop that's too high.
Yep.
I could now design my ADU to make it compliant, so that for me.
Yeah.
And then you're right, absolutely, sell off the house, or maybe even have a family member move into the house, rent it off, and now I've got someone who's a caregiver, right, living in the front house in front of me.
I can just see where that could work either way. Like they can stay in the house, but if usually you're talking probably not too big of a home, like you said, like a 3-2, maybe 1,600 square feet. But if the home isn't really geared for them, or let's say by whatever reason you've got a 2-story home and that person can't do stairs anymore, then they could build a compliant ADU for all of their needs, whatever they need. And if they wanted to downsize into that, keep it, sell it, whatever. They've got income that they can live on for the rest of their lives.
Again, to me, that's the thing that I like about this law, is that it provides so many options to people.
Absolutely.
Options to investors, right? Whether I'm a fix and flip investor or a buy and hold investor, I now have additional options because I'm able to create an additional unit that I can rent or sell and not have to acquire more land.
Right.
Which makes my return on investment exponentially higher than if I just had to go buy a whole nother parcel someplace else.
Or just have to be stuck with just a single family home in SFR1, right? Where it was just like, that's it, that's all you could do. You could build an ADU and that you're definitely improving the property at that point. But this will allow you to have a lot more options with it. So I can definitely see that.
I may be a duplex investor, right? I could go buy a duplex that has a detached garage, convert the garage to an ADU, subdivide it, keep my regular structure as one duplex structure.
Yeah.
Now I have a separate APN in the back that I have another rental unit.
Yep.
And the fact that it has a different APN, I can now put debt against that one. And that property is now appreciating the same way my front property is.
Yeah.
In California, property appreciates on average about 5 to 6% per year.
Yeah.
So now instead of having just one lot at $1 million that's appreciating at 5 to 6, I now have two lots valued at 1.5 million from our example earlier, that are now also getting appreciation.
That's amazing.
The cash flow perspectives, the long-term appreciation perspectives on this is a game changer for smaller California investors.
Yeah, and the way to win and to build your wealth portfolio without having to acquire more land, which is where we here are at a loss. Like you have to, it's like funny. I say to clients, well, I can get you a house east of town where we might find a 7,500 square foot lot or an 8,000 square foot lot. And please don't laugh, all of you in the Midwest. Like, I'm from Texas, honey. I know land when I see it. And, those kind of lots, a minimum of 12,000 or a quarter acre, no problem. Doesn't exist where we are, especially not inland and closer to the water. It just does. In fact, even the closer to the water you get, the less land there is. So it's kind of interesting to kind of see how this could definitely be a game changer. So anything else you'd like to add about the law, or what you're finding out when you're personally looking for things? Like you said, obviously a corner lot would be fantastic because you wouldn't have to build in necessarily an easement. It really does depend on the position of the lot and where it is and all that good stuff. But for any layman, would there be anything that you would advise them to do?
Yeah, I think right now, look, if you're interested in this, just build the ADU, right? Yep. That's already completely legal.
Get your permits, do that, get it out of the way.
Get your permits, start construction, rent it out, have a family member move in there, whatever you're going to do, and know that you may have the ability based on your community to then at some point in time go through the subdivision process. You might want to, like I know specifically the city of Los Angeles is already working on their rules and regulations on this new AB 1033.
Any ATA on that?
No ETA, but again, the city of LA has a housing shortage.
Yeah,
so this is something for them that they can use to solve their problem
and meet their requirement with the state.
And it's affordable housing, right? Or more affordable than just, someone building a condo complex and selling condos. So yeah, you can talk to your city, ask if this is something they are working on. The city may tell you there is no way we're ever going to allow this.
Okay.
Or the city may say, hey, listen, we actually think this is a cool idea. We're working on it. Well, if the city says they're working on it, then just start the process of building your ADU.
And start looking in those areas where you can find out, hey, are you thinking about adopting this? Because if so, that tells just even a first-time investor, okay, those would be the cities, then you would make a list of then the cities that think you're going to adopt the program.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. That is amazing. And oh my God, like a lot of information, but 2024 is going to be an interesting year. They're going to reduce some interest rates. I think people are going to get off the fence, I hope, this year and get back into the market and start to really see that even as a state, we're trying to get creative with housing and the shortage of the housing situation. So, David, you have been amazing, and thank you. That was a download of a lot of information, but I loved it, and that's great. And obviously, the takeaway overall is like building an ADU is going to add value even if your city does not adopt the program, right? But if it does, go ahead and get the build out and get that in the way, or out of the way, I should say. And then if the city does adopt it, see if your ordinances are all approved. And then if so, then you could subdivide and then potentially create additional income for yourself.
The ADU might be the cake. Yeah. This new AB 1033 could be the frosting.
Absolutely.
Right?
I love it.
And so eventually this may be something that comes in and gives you the opportunity to do that. But, this has been in effect for a couple of months now. You could probably go to your local building department. You could call them and just say, listen, is this something that you guys are actually working on?
Yeah.
And they would probably tell you.
That's amazing. So, David, if people wanted to get to reach you or find out more about what you're doing with your fix and flips and also your investments and stuff, how would people reach you?
Well, you can go on my website. It's david@coregroup.com, or on Facebook, you can find us at Co-Real Estate Group, or you can send me an email. My email is david@coregroup.com.
And I have to give a little secret. David's also in my office, and I love him. We love to work together. We get certified together on a lot of stuff, and we always are talking like what's happening in the market. And I just love that. It's really nice to have, people that are forward thinking and are always looking out for the next best thing, which is awesome, which is great, which is what I like to bring on the show.
And I'm glad you're doing this. I mean, getting a platform to share this information. I really think this is the most significant piece of legislation that for California housing. It's not going to solve everything.
No.
But it's going to create a significant chunk that's going to help us and our affordability as a state. So
absolutely.
Thank you for giving me the platform to talk about it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. 110%. And also, guys, as you know, Real Estate of Mind, we love to do this. This is what we're all about. We love to bring you things that maybe you wouldn't have thought about, but want to talk about. And if I've missed something, you know what? Reach out, like and subscribe to Real Estate of Mind. We're on YouTube. And yeah, you can even put in a comment, like if there's something that we haven't covered that you'd want to see us have a topic of conversation about, please feel free. Let us know, because without you, there is no us. And we're also on Instagram at My City of Angels and OC and Me for Orange County. The beauty of what I've done is, like in the past during COVID, we actually expanded the business from LA to Orange County. So my partner and I, we focus on the beach cities, and we're there to help you, and also can even help you get a referral if you decide that California isn't the state for you anymore. Well, we can help you with that as well. So reach out and say hello on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And stay tuned for the next episode that we will see you on Real Estate of Mind.